A Boeing 737 MAX 8, operating Lion Air Flight 610 crashed after takeoff. Another Boeing 737 MAX 8, operating Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302, crashed shortly after takeoff.
The pilots were flying without the knowledge that there was another system capable of taking over the control of their planes.
If the FAA had not grounded the plane, it would have resulted to 15 more air crashes globally, over the next 2 decades. October 29, 2018. Indonesia. A Boeing 737 MAX 8, operating Lion Air Flight 610 crashed after takeoff from Jakarta, killing all 189 on board. March 10, 2019. Ethiopia. Barely 5 months after the first crash, another Boeing 737 MAX 8, operating Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302, crashed shortly after takeoff from Addis Ababa Airport, killing all 157 on board. Due to a similar fault in both incidents, the Civil Aviation Administration of China, CAAC, was the first to issue a grounding order on the Boeing 737 MAX the next day. For the CAAC to ground the plane before the United States Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, was unprecedented. FAA was regarded as the global leader in the aviation industry. This was followed in quick succession the following day, March 12, by Singapore, India, Turkey, South Korea, the European Union, Australia and Malaysia. Despite, the US FAA issued an affirmation of the continued airworthiness of the 737 MAX. Pressure continued to mount up on FAA as more countries jumped into the bandwagon to ground the 737 MAX. Finally, on March 13, 2019, FAA issued its grounding order on 737 MAX. By then, 51 other regulators had already grounded the plane. According to statistical simulations, if the FAA had not grounded the plane, it would have resulted to 15 more air crashes globally, over the next 2 decades. This would have made 737 MAX the most fatal aircraft to have ever been designed and built. Boeing is an American icon revered around the world for its engineering innovation. With 2 crashes in under 6 months, the reputation of the company, which started in 1916, came under critics and scrutiny. Later, the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, also started investigating whether Boeing properly disclosed issues tied to the grounding of its 737 MAX airliners. Concluding from investigations that followed, the SEC said, after the first crash, Boeing and Mr. Muhlenberg, the then CEO of Boeing, knew that MCAS posed an ongoing airplane safety issue, but assured the public that the 737 MAX was safe to fly. What is MCAS? Why is the SEC investigating a civil air crash? As more questions emerged, the untold stories behind the corporate walls of Boeing started peeling layer by layer. One message from someone within Boeing even described the 737 MAX as a plane, designed by clowns, overseen by monkeys.
The global aviation industry has an estimated value of $412 billion in 2021. This is more than the GDP of Hong Kong or Singapore in the same year, or more than 30% larger than the GDP of Finland, a Nordic country with population of more than 5.5 million people. Yet, in such an enormous industry, there are very few suppliers of aircraft. In the large commercial aircraft market of the airline supply business, the major players are American-based Boeing and the Airbus Group, formerly known as the European Aeronautic Defence and Space Company, EADS. Despite, rivalry in this duopoly industry is intense and competition can be overwhelming. Boeing's and Airbus's established jet brands are the 7 Series and A Series, respectively. For Boeing, the 737 is the best-selling airliner, while at Airbus, it is the A320. Boeing 737 made its first flight in April 1967, and had dominated the market ever since, with a total of more than 15,000 aircrafts ordered to date. This began to change when Airbus launched the A320 in March of 1984, and introduced this aircraft to Air France in April 1988. The A320 came as a variant of its predecessor, the A300 series, which initially started as a single-aisle aircraft. To keep up with the industry's requirements of cost-effectiveness and fuel efficiencies, Airbus regularly modified and improved the A320 design, until it eventually became the Airbus A320neo family. This is a development of the A320 family of narrow-body airliners. Neo being Greek for new, as well as an initialism for new engine option. Re-engined with CFM LEAP 1A, or Pratt & Whitney PW1000G engines, and fitted with sharklets as standard, it is 15% to 20% more fuel efficient than its earlier version. In October 2019, the A320 family ultimately surpassed the Boeing 737 to become the highest-selling airliner, with a total order of 15,193 and respectively, 15,136 aircraft by the end of that month. By July 2021, Airbus, including the A220, had a 65% share of the single-aisle backlog compared to Boeing's 35% share. Needless to say, Boeing would not be sitting idle by, watching Airbus dethrone themselves and seizing the market share in this lucrative industry. Boeing had to fight back, and, very relentlessly, they did. While Boeing had planned to build an all-new jet to replace the 737, it was sidetracked by its very own Dreamliner debacle. Adding fuel to fire, Airbus shocked everyone in November 2010 by announcing a simple upgrade to its 320neo family of planes. These new planes would have engines that increased fuel efficiency and required no lengthy training for pilots to fly. This was a tremendous cost saver for airlines, and it smoothened the pilots' transition to the new aircraft, without having to spend millions of dollars in the flight simulator rooms. Boeing felt compelled to do the same when they introduced a new aircraft to stay ahead of this intense rivalry. If Boeing didn't act, or waited too long, they would soon be sidelined by the competition. As time passed, the airline companies grew impatient. American Airlines called Boeing and said,
"We are going to buy foreign planes, and they will all be Airbus unless you can match their fuel economy. And the fact that no pilot training is required. It's identical to their other Airbus models."
And the Boeing CEO said,
No. We'll match that. We want half that order.
If you would like to find out about the Boeing Dreamliner debacle, type Dreamliner in the commentaries below. I will make a video on this topic if there are enough requests.
Before the disasters happened, Boeing was already fighting for its life, literally. However, instead of going back to the basics and redesigning a new aircraft from the beginning, Boeing decided to take shortcuts. A shortcut that will save them time and resources but also prove to be fatal, resulting to the loss of 346 lives as we know today. Boeing began to fit newer fuel-efficient engines to the 737 aircraft design. There was one major problem though. The original 737 was designed in 1967, and built low to the ground. The lower stance allowed baggage handlers easy access to the plane's cargo area, and enabled passengers and crew to board using portable stairways. The new 737 model will be powered by CFM International LEAP 1B engines. This engine reduces carbon dioxide emissions by an additional 10 to 12%, in comparison with existing fuel-efficient single-aisle aircraft. These engines are larger and the body of the 737 was too low to the ground. There was just not enough space to slide this engine under the wings of the aircraft. As a workaround, the engineers in Boeing simply moved these engines forward and higher, and a new 737 model was born. They called this the 737 MAX. Unfortunately, this way of fitting new engines to the plane altered the profile of the wing's leading edges, changing the aerodynamics of the aircraft. With the aircraft's flight traits dramatically changed, the plane's nose would pitch upwards during flight. If not countered, the upward pitch would cause the aircraft to lose forward airspeed, a precursor to a stall and potential crash. Still reluctant to invest time and resources for an aerodynamic solution, Boeing took second shortcut to the problem. They developed the Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System, or MCAS. This is a software intended to mimic the flight behavior of the previous generation of the 737s, and to automatically push down the plane's nose, thereby resolving the issues caused by the upward pitch in the aerodynamics of the new plane. When a single angle of attack sensor indicated that the angle was too high, MCAS would trim the horizontal stabilizer in the nose-down direction, whenever the system sensed the plane was continuing to climb. The intention of the MCAS was only to be triggered and take over control of the plane when it sensed an imminent stall. However, the system is flawed. There were several instances when the MCAS attempted to push the 737 nose downward, when it should not. During flight turbulences, pilots may react to the sudden downward motion of the aircraft and pull up on the flight controls. The MCAS may falsely sense a nose-up problem, gets triggered to gain control of the plane to push the nose down. This resulted to the tug-of-war between the pilot and the flawed MCAS, which eventually resulted to the tragic air crashes of Lion Air and Ethiopian Airlines. At this point, all pieces to the puzzle behind the fatal air crashes seem to have been revealed. Evidences are pointing to the flawed flight stabilizing software, MCAS, as the main culprit. Spoiler alert: there is a plot twist. With proper pilot training, the flaws of MCAS could still be overcome. However, Boeing did no mention of the MCAS to the pilots flying the 737 MAX. The pilots were flying without the knowledge that there was another system capable of taking over the control of their planes. They are not the only ones flying the plane. In the next part of this series, we will continue to reveal more insights to this story, and share with you how Boeing slowly strayed away from being an innovative company, to end up in a mess it could have avoided.